Welcome to the Zachrilege cast, episode number 24, recorded on July 22nd, 2015. Do not adjust your earbuds. You're watching and or listening to the Zachrilege cast. I already said that. Who am I? I am a guy with a really long commute, so I listen to a lot of podcasts, and that means I like to give back, and I have my own, featuring the best podcasters, writers, and cool people. This show brings on anyone who I deem awesome enough to talk to about atheism, secularism, and this week, well, actually, we're not going to talk about beerism. We might talk about vapeism, since we have a vape guy over here. So, first of all, thanks to Joe Kindick, who was my last guest 2 weeks ago. We needed a week off to prepare for one Shane Thrapp, the man behind the Forsyth Area Critical Thinkers, the guy who managed to muscle himself onto the No Religion Required show. And I hear he has his own podcast going on. So, Shane, how are you doing, and how's the science?
Hey, it's going good. I'm doing great. Everything's groovy.
Everything's groovy. So where exactly are you located?
I am actually located in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. So I'm on the back end of the mountains, about 3 hours from the beach. It's a nice little area to be.
Either one.
Yeah.
So you're originally from North Carolina?
No, I'm actually from Texas, born and raised in Northeast Texas, near Texarkana.
So the comparison between like the religious crazy people in Texas and North Carolina, is it actually closer than people think?
No. The people in Texas are crazy. They're all crazy. So the most extreme that you have in North Carolina is your average Sunday preacher in Texas.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things.
But I feel like North Carolina's had more than its share of kind of Christian extremism stories compared to even Texas. Maybe Texas, they just expect it.
Yeah, well, yeah, Texas is kind of like the norm. In North Carolina, it's kind of like the abnorm. So you see, when it happens, it's news. When it happens in Texas, it's just Wednesday night. So it's just a lot more evident here when somebody goes off the rails. Right now, we're dealing with the North Carolina, the magistrates being able to say no, that they're not going to give out homosexual or same-sex marriage certificates, and that's a big deal for a lot of people. And even though it's federally mandated that they have to do their job since the SCOTUS ruling, they still have the state law that says that they have the right to hold to their religious convictions and things like that. And so we're waiting for that to start getting challenged. We actually just had a really crazy situation happen a couple of weeks ago where a lady was like, I'm not going to give out, a marriage certificate to a same-sex couple. The couple sat there and just started filming her. They're like, why are you not going to let us marry each other? And she's like, because it goes against my religious conviction. And this lady's been married 3 times. You're okay with divorce, not gay marriage.
Yeah, you actually covered a little bit on there in your homosexuality episode of your new podcast. We'll be talking about that in just a little bit. We want to know about you, though, first, before we get into your, many pursuits.
Oh,
do you have a religious background? Like, is your family religious?
Yeah, like the third worst religion that you can be in America, behind Mormon and Jehovah's Witness. I was Southern Pentecostal.
Ooh.
Like hardcore fundamental.
Pentecostal.
Yeah.
It's Pentecostal.
Yeah, so, and on top of that, our pastor decided he wanted to be a cult leader as well as just being batshit crazy. And so it went south. So I was born and raised into it. My mom was really hardcore into it. My grandmother was very hardcore into it. And then my father was kind of apathetic about it. But, whenever my mom left him, he prayed a lot more. So it just depended on how drunk he was. And then when I was growing up, I was always very inquisitive, and I was always reading a lot. Because when you grow up in a small community of 30 people, and your nearest town is 20 miles away, and your nearest big city is Texarkana of 75,000, and it's 70 miles away, you don't have a whole lot of things to do. You look forward to going to school because that's when you actually see people. And so I was always really inquisitive, and my mom would always take me to church, Sunday, Wednesday, Saturday night. And then it started getting really shady. We had one of those pastors who was very fire and brimstone kind of guys, and he had a speaker system that was just ridiculous for a very small church. Probably about 200 people went to this church, which was everybody in our area. And just every week he was very Old Testament. Very, very few times do I remember him ever doing like New Testament, Jesus loves you. It was always Old Testament, God's going to smite you if you don't follow. And so we weren't allowed to watch TV. We weren't allowed to listen to radio unless it was Billy Graham. We weren't allowed to listen to any other music other than gospel, which it had to be white people gospel. It couldn't be, anything with rhythm or anything. And it was pretty intense for a really long time. And then my first horrible reaction to the church was we were going over the Amalekite story in the Old Testament where God tells them to go and wipe them all out, to the man, woman, and child, including the oxen
And the babies. We lost the volume. Uh-oh. Looks like you muted yourself there, Shane.
Yep, I got you. Sorry about that.
I should have a signal. Yeah, it cut out for a second because you were talking about basically the one of the many times where God decided to murder an entire nation, right?
Right.
The women of certain age.
Yes, and I remember asking after the service, and everybody's kind of milling around, hey, telling them how much they love each other, and I asked my mom, I was just like, why is God so mean? Because I'm listening to this sermon for an hour and a half long, listening to it sounds horrible, and here I am reading all these different books, and I know what bad guy sounds like, and I'm 11 years old, so I've got a little bit, of imagination, and the pastor overheard me, and he dragged me up front, like grabs me by my arm, drags me up front, calls all the elders of the church, all the older men of the church, and they proceeded to have an hour-long exorcism on me, because obviously if I'm questioning God, I'm demon-possessed.
So obviously it worked, right?
Yes. If by worked you mean terrified an 11-year-old into being good in church for the next 2 years.
So what would they say at that church if someone were wearing a T-shirt like this one? Here we go.
Hey, that looks familiar.
I had to show it off.
Evolution doesn't exist, and it's not real, and the Earth is only 6,000 and some change year old. They were very young Earth creationists as well. They were science deniers of the best sort, worst sort. And so that was probably one of my worst experiences with church.
Yeah, I was on Twitter today, and I think someone responded to someone with pastor in their Twitter handle, and they're like, so when did you accept your Nobel Prize for debunking evolution? And yeah, it pretty much ends that right there. There's not a lot of science behind that usually.
Yeah. So, and so after that, I just kind of learned that I needed to shut up and not say anything in church. And eventually my grandma actually wound up standing up to the pastor about 3 years later and called him out on a bunch of stuff that he was doing. And at this point he had married his third wife. And he had really started doing some very shady things with other people within the church. And he was really trying to be very controlling of the church. And finally, my grandma had had enough. And then after church one day, she just she stood up and she essentially lost her shit. She was just, she was telling him that he wasn't being like Jesus and that he was the devil and that he was the one that was causing all the issues with the church. And it was a woman, 55-year-old woman at this point, who's standing up in the middle of the church, a very, very hardcore, misogynist, patriarchal church, with her hair up in a bun because they weren't allowed to cut their hair, and wearing a cotton dress because they're not allowed to wear anything that's mixed fabrics. And she's shaking her fist at him, and she's sitting there going, how dare you sit here and be like this? And then, and she was very adamant. She was throwing a lot of New Testament scripture at him, and then she wound up leaving the church, and she actually wound up taking half the church with her. And so she was trying to put 75 people into a basement that she had built onto her house to fit them all. And so she started preaching, and so my grandma was a preacher. And so
I think that's the first time I've heard in the story that my grandma was a preacher. How did it hang on? Did the congregation stick around for a while?
Not his. His congregation actually wound up being, well, they don't like it when the FBI shows up and arrests you for breaking a large number of laws. And apparently somebody had reported it to him, the FBI, and the FBI came in with the sheriffs, and they said you're under arrest, and he got arrested for bigamy, fraud, child molestation, and a whole list of other things. And so that church just folded. It's now a Baptist church, and her church flourished. It got to the point where she couldn't hold all the people in there, so she actually went around to different churches in the area to find one that she thought would take care of her flock the best. And so she found another church, and she wound up having everybody going into that church and actually being a part of it. And so, but she was always the leader of that one group of 75 to 100 people. Everybody always went to her for advice. Everybody always went to her if they were having issues and problems and things like that. She was awesome. She was very much the non-judgmental. I love you. You're going to sin. That's normal. But Jesus is going to forgive you because I'm going to pray my heart out for you. And so that was my life. That was my childhood. Was seeing that. So
you saw the extreme, almost the really bad side of it, and then the good side where it's kind of like a community side. When did you decide,
right.
I don't believe this anymore and I have to go a different direction?
Right. Sorry. Can you hear me okay still?
It's a little softer, but...
Okay. These things are hot, so therefore it's...
Yeah, well, I have all the lights in this room pointed at me, so I know of what you speak.
So, and then I actually wound up having to go to a different school. I couldn't go to the all-white school I was going to because they didn't go past 8th grade. And so my mom, she decided to be preemptive about it, and she actually transferred me in 6th grade, mainly because I was having a lot of issues. And so I was going through... Well, when I say a lot of issues, I grew up I have Asperger's, but back in the early 90s, they didn't know what Asperger's was. And so it was very hard for me to deal with social situations and dealing with people constructively. And so I was getting into fights and things like that because people would pick on me and things like that. People stopped picking on me once I hit 6 foot in 8th grade. it was a little bit more difficult to pick on me then. So
Yeah, you earned your distance there.
yeah. So and then just once I made it into a different school, different people, different people I wasn't going to church with, black people, because until this point I'd never met or hung out with a black person. And this is, we're talking early 90s. And so I started learning things, and I started loving science. And that's when I really started getting into science and history. And then I got into ninth grade, and I got into a world religion class, and that was all she wrote. Because once I started finding out that I could research that kind of stuff, I've been studying it ever since. And that's pretty much me in a nutshell. I did a lot of different stuff. I did a lot of different drugs. I had fun, but I made some bad choices. But then again, who doesn't make bad choices when they're teenagers?
Jesus. Oh, sorry. There's no record of his teenage years, apparently.
Yeah.
Maybe somewhere.
There's supposed to be a movie coming out about his life from whenever he was 9, teaching the people in the temple to when he turns 33. There's supposed to be a TV show or a movie to come out to like chronicle those events.
Well, I heard there was that show. What was the guy who produced like Survivor, and it was called AD, and it was about Jesus, and I guess it got canceled before the second season could happen. I'm like, Jesus got canceled? Damn, that's rough.
Yeah, those. I know they're trying to be good people about doing what they do, but at the same time, a lot of people realize that they're taking a lot of creative license with what they're showing, and it doesn't jive with the traditional crowd, and obviously it doesn't jive with us. So
yeah, you think the greatest story ever told needs to be upsold? That's a bit of a red flag. I'll take a quick pause to do my first live read. I didn't write a bunch of stuff, so I'm just going to say for this week, for the podcasts of the week, well, there's one that we'll be talking about, Country Fried Freethinkers. We'll be hitting you in a minute. But this week on Beyond the Trailer Park, they had David Fitzgerald, and I always like listening to David Fitzgerald because he's a funny guy, and he also knows the Mormon Church really well, and he's pretty big on his book Nailed about myths that prove that Christ didn't exist. Such a good book that he's going to have a sequel. And he has like 13 cats, and who doesn't hate cats? I'll have to mention, by the way, I think I said a few weeks ago that I lost my cat, Chewy. I just obtained 2 new kittens, so sorry, Dave Foda, but I have cats. Because apparently Dave Foda hates cats. See what you learn on podcasts? So many important details. But let's get back to Shane. So Shane, you, of course, have started a podcast recently, but you are the president of the Forsyth County or area Freethinkers? What's this group all about?
It's Forsyth Area Critical Thinkers, and we're a secular group that doesn't bar anybody from our group. We're open to anybody who comes in. The only caveats that we add to that is that you have to be willing to be a critical thinker. That's part of the title. And also just understand that when you come in, you're going to be treated with respect, but your ideas and your beliefs are going to be up for grabs. And so we may come, we have a guy who comes quite often. His name is Nick. He's actually going to be doing a debate for us pretty soon. And he's actually a fairly hardcore Catholic. And he comes and he will sit there and he'll discuss things with us, and we'll kind of pick apart the arguments, and then we'll also listen to new arguments, and then we'll actually just kind of, but he's open to the critical thinking. He thinks that's a wonderful thing, and that's what we're about, is we're about bringing people together to pick apart different ideas, politics, history, science, anything that is, open for discussion. We open it up, and we meet, 2 or 3 times a month, and we have an atheist-only meeting, and then we have a meeting where everybody can get together, and then we have various little things that we work with. Our local group, Humanism with Heart, and that is run by a good friend of mine, Eric, and they are the humanist chapter here in Winston-Salem, and so we have a large number of our people that go to those as well, and then we have a large number of their people who come to us because some of them aren't very spiritual. They're more on the atheist side of things, or they're more on the critical thinking side of things, and so they like to hang out and have intelligent conversation.
What do you think when you hear, this is just a personal thing that I'll throw in here, what do you think when you hear the word like spiritual? What does that mean to you?
To me personally,
Sure.
you're talking to yourself. You know, a friend of mine at work, she sits there and she goes, everybody has a spiritual side. It's part of who we are. And what she is describing when she describes it, and a lot of people, when they say spiritual, they are simply saying, I don't know, but there's something out there that I can't quantify into a language that anybody else would understand. It's, strange coincidences happen, strange things happen to them that have caused them not to be able to explain it. So the easy answer is, oh, that must be something spiritual. For Christians, it's like, oh, God, helped me with it, or I was healed by Jesus. Those things that are intangible that people just don't take the time to critically think about and examine and look at the evidence. And so that's usually what I hear when I hear spiritual, and so that's what it means to me. We are willing to say I don't know, or think about it deeply, whereas they're not. They're not able to, or they're not willing to.
We're not supposed to. I think it's part of the playbook. But I just hear the people say you're not religious but spiritual. But it's just a word that I think ultimately, if you look at it closely, doesn't have any meaning. I feel like it's either it's natural or it doesn't exist. Like if it's quote unquote supernatural, then we can actually should be able to find a way to test it.
Mm-hmm.
And if God's rules have no rules, then we can't measure it, and it's almost the same as it doesn't exist. So I just was curious about that. I like the fact that you do like a mixed group. Is it a pretty big group you have there then?
We have probably about 75 members, 75, 45 active members, but our meetups are usually 20 to 30. Just depends on what we're doing.
And were you behind this, getting this started, or is it somebody else?
No, this was started back in 2008 by a gentleman named Jim Morey and a friend of his, and they started it up, and I actually just took control back in May of last year. And since then, I've been really trying to move the group into different directions, and the people who want to have more activism roles, I want to encourage them to do activism. The people who want to do more social roles, and we make sure we support that. And the people who really want to have like speakers come in and things like that, then that's kind of the direction that we go. I got us involved with a number of different. ReasonCon was one of them. A couple of other ones. We wound up going down to the Carolina Secular Conference and just trying to get Forsyth area critical thinkers out there and known. And and then I also sell the T-shirts, such as what you're wearing right now. You can find them at facriticalthinker.org.
There you go. Get a little plug. Yeah, I saw the shirt at the conference, and I had to get it, and I ordered one. And I have what, like 3 freethinker / atheist shirts, and I usually wouldn't wear them around, although there are times when you can pull this one off because it isn't necessarily anti-religion, although some religious people would think so.
Yeah,
So
definitely someone. Funny thing, there was a lady at ReasonCon this year. She came over and she saw that shirt, and she's like, "So, evolution's not real, right?" I said, "Are you trolling me? Really?"
Yeah.
So let me explain to you how evolution works. And she's like, no, no, we didn't descend from chimpanzees or monkeys or anything like that. I said, technically speaking, we descended from an ancestor of the monkeys and the gorillas, and we came one tree down, and then the monkeys and the apes came off that. And she's like, how do you know that? I said, science. It explains it. The fossil record, patterns of genetics, all of these different sciences all agree that this is what happened. And she's like, well, it's just a theory. After my right pupil exploded, um, I hate that. That's like one of my biggest pet peeves is when people say, oh, it's just a theory. I was like, gravity is a theory. Are you floating yet? No. So I schooled her on that until her brain exploded, and then went on about my business. So it was entertaining. So
I would have been happy if she had said, "Were you there?"
Oh
That
gosh.
Ken Ham accent. So this
Yeah.
connects nicely because you did an episode of your podcast. You're talking about homosexuality and how Christians kind of hit on all these anti-gay passages kind of selectively, but they don't deal with the other issues that exist around there about eating shrimp or mixed fabrics. And I noticed that Christians go after evolution, which is a scientific theory, but they don't go after other scientific theories like gravity. That for some reason, evolution is the one that gets all this attention. And I don't know. I don't know what the deal is. What is it about the selective nature of people doing this cherry picking?
Well, it's just kind of how it's not their fault. So we've been dealing with this for 2,000 years, well, 1,700 years, since the Catholic Church took over the teachings of Christ and things like that. Historically speaking, all of the information from the Bible came from the bishop or the priest who was teaching it to you. And so people got used to a person of authority telling them a moral story or explaining an anecdote to them or explaining different things from the Bible to them, and that became trustworthy. And so when you have pastors now who sit here and they show Genesis and they talk about, well, this is how it happened. God created, sun and earth, and then he created the waters, and then, okay, that's how it happened, and it happened 6,666 years ago. I love that number. Anyways,
Give or take.
Yeah, give or take, a few.
0.66.
So, and they take that, and when your layman comes on off the street and they're trying to talk to you about it, the reason they're cherry picking is because that's what they've heard in church. Now, your apologists, the people who really know and understand it, they're legitimately they're fabricating what their interpretation of the Bible is. They want it to mean something, so they find the passages in the Bible to make it mean what they want it to mean, and then they twist it up to make it how it is. So that's why being left-handed isn't a sin anymore, even though it was 200 years ago. Go ahead.
Yeah, my grandmother, and I'm sure I've mentioned this before, like when she was in regular school, she was left-handed, and we have a lot of left-handed in my family, and they basically said, no, you're not. You have to be a right-handed. And that was, 1940.
Did they bind her hand?
I don't know if there was any binding involved. I didn't get that detail, but yeah, it was like you couldn't be that way because Jesus sat on the right hand, although did he sit on his own right hand? And it's probably a bad masturbation joke to be made there, but yeah, it's like
did he give
you're on the side of your own hand.
Yeah. Back then that's what the pastors would preach and teach and things like that, and so that was what was bad. And now we have so many people who are young earth creationists who are coming up that, I say young people, we don't have a whole lot of young people who are young earth creationists, unless they're just heavily indoctrinated. But the pastor is still the leader. He's still trustworthy. Until he breaks that trust, people are still going to be misinformed. And so they're going to still parrot what he says whenever they're confronted with it on the street. The lady who sat here and said that to me at ReasonCon, she said it because her pastor had said it, and Fox News has said it, and all these other different things. Glenn Beck has said it, and things like that. These different avenues of authority who misuse and misinform the masses. And so they simply are parrots. That's just essentially what you're dealing with whenever it's something like that. Whether or not it's homosexuality, evolution, misogyny, or any of the different subject matters, people hear what their leader tells them, and they're sheep, and they repeat it, and on an event, and everything they say is blah. Sorry, I couldn't help it.
You couldn't help it. Yeah, I keep coming back to this point that the people who are harmed by religion are the people who actually are religious. Usually it's the Muslims are killing other Muslims and the Christians who are treating the other Christians poorly. And the people in church are usually the ones who are the victims. So it's hard to, especially when you get those brain-numbing lines that you hear all the time, like you must hate God. It's hard to hear that stuff, but you're like, well, you take a second to think where people are coming from. It helps a little bit. But you are a newly minted podcaster, so I want to hear about your Country Fried Freethinkers. Or is it Country Fried Freethought?
It's Country Fried Freethought. It's
when I brand it properly.
Yeah, definitely branded properly. We're the Burning Brain. So me and Daniel Duncan got together, good Lord, 2-3 months ago, and we were like, dude, we need to make a podcast, And I was like, everybody makes a podcast. And he's like, I know, but we can come up with something different. And so we bounced around a couple of ideas. We started working out different things, and we were like, you know what somebody doesn't do? And Daniel's like, what? I was like, nobody does everything. He's like, what? I was like, we need to do a podcast that covers a specific subject, and then everything to do with that as far as different religions are concerned. So whereas a lot of different podcasts do, just a specific religion and then what they say about that religion in news stories and stuff like that, we go the other direction. We pick a subject. In this case, so far we've done homosexuality and rape. And then we cover all the different texts from the Vedas, Christianity, Judaism, the Islam, of course, you have to do those. But we also cover Buddhism, Jainism, Wiccan, Levian Satanism. We cover all the different texts and what they say about that subject matter.
Yeah, I like the family-friendly homosexuality and rape. How do you top those two?
We've got a long laundry list of different ones that we have found. So the first half of our show is we cover relevant news stories that have something to do with the subject matter, which rape was really depressing, because we were reading these stories and they're horrific, but then homosexuality was just about as bad, and so then we find the fundamental scriptures that people still use to justify the behavior that's being done.
Yeah, so what did you discover, let's just pick homosexuality because it's one I heard today. What did you discover in your kind of research that kind of surprised you about that?
Homosexuality. And honestly, we've heard so many of the different arguments, but honestly, the one that surprised me the most is the Hindu one. Granted, it was a small subsect of a group that was doing it, but their justification for having the mother rape the son, or having the brothers rape the sisters, or cousins rape the sisters who were gay, to make them like straight sex, blew my mind.
Yeah, it's let's give you the worst possible experience for this type of sex. And then that'll turn you to thinking, no, I actually like this.
Yeah.
It's I want you to like Coca-Cola. So I'm going to give you a bottle of Coca-Cola that actually has like half battery acid in it.
Absolutely.
Like, wait a
You're
second.
gonna love Coca-Cola. Drink this battery acid. No.
What is crazy talk?
So,
Gosh.
and also the craziest one that came up in rape, and I won't ruin it for you or anything, but Hindu is also the worst one in rape as well. Yeah. If y'all haven't heard the story on the Hindu one, y'all really need to listen to the rape podcast, and go from there. It's going to blow your mind when you hear the scripture that justifies how men treat women in Hindu religion.
I'm sure it's lovely.
Not really, but yeah, go ahead. Listen to the podcast.
No, there were 2 quotes from there because I love to do like out of context quotes. So you said, my first experience with gay sex was with 2 dogs. And then later in the episode, do I have a lesbian Thetan? That's good stuff right there.
Okay, so to expand on that one, my first experience with homosexuality, my personal experience with it, was not me with 2 dogs. It was two male dogs who had tied up. And I went to my dad and ran in there, and I was like, Daddy, I was 8 years old. And like, the dogs are hung up on each other. Their butts are stuck together. And that's how I described it to my dad. And my dad died. He just died laughing. Went out there and threw a couple rocks at the dogs, and anyways. And then, the lesbian Thetan really just me messing around with Daniel to see if I could get him to crack up. He didn't. He's a little stoic, but it worked. Stoic. That's the word. We promiscuous crap all the time. You'll hear it in the upcoming one. We're doing the next one is going to be on diet, and the next one after that's going to be on government. So,
some light topics.
Yeah, light topics. We did the 2 heavy ones to kind of introduce ourselves to the world. The next ones will be kind of light, even though diet's kind of depressing in one point too.
Oh, good. Yeah, I was wondering about the whole like halal versus Jewish. How like all the Muslims seem to hate Jewish people, but they seem to have very similar like rules on diet.
We actually had to cut out a whole bunch of the stuff on halal because we covered it all into Jewish.
Yes, okay. It's not terribly different, but so real quick, so before we continue the show, live read, a little self-promo. So if you want to support this show, you can go to patreon.com/Zachrilege and be cool like Hugh Man and The Religion Required, who actually support this show. Maybe because they enjoy my grilling stylings. I don't know what it is, but they do support the show. And you can also, there's a Facebook page, Zachrilege Cast, where I do updates. And I also highlight other podcasts I like. It's not just about me. And you can go to Twitter and see Zachrilege, which I like to say is spelled like sacrilege, but you throw an H in there, and it just, marketing is not my strong suit, even though I technically do it for a living. So anyway, let's get back to the show, because that's what we're all about. You also mentioned during your homosexuality episode something called vomit therapy, which I thought was like me listening to Ken Ham talk.
Kind of the same thing.
Maybe you could go into what that was.
So vomit therapy is a corrective therapy procedure that is done through a therapist. You go to the therapist, and what they do is they give you a medicine. You can either take it by eyedropper or by a pill, or by a little shot, and the stuff makes you vomit, like everything that's in your stomach, and you give it to yourself every time you find yourself attracted to a person of the same sex, and So, and then they show you a bunch of different pictures, and when you find one that you're attracted to, and if it happens to be, if you're a guy and you take the shot, and it makes you throw up. So the idea behind it is every time you see somebody,
it's like I dropped something. It's like a bad association, right?
Right. So it's supposed
but it's
to
a good association.
Like, it depends on how much you're into vomit porn. So that's a thing, by the way. Don't ask how I know that. Yeah.
Uh-huh. How can I
So
not? Oh, yeah, we'll keep going. We're on a
yeah.
roll, people.
So yeah, this podcast just went downhill. Oh. So that's essentially the idea behind it. Is it's supposed to give you a negative reaction to something you're naturally attracted to. Um, there was also a part of a different study where they would attach electrodes to your testicles or to your vagina if you're a woman, and you carried around a little dial-o-meter with you and with a little red button on it. And if you found yourself attracted to a person, you dialed it to what you thought would be a punishment, and then you hit the red button and it would shock your testicles or vagina.
So you'd be carrying one of these around.
Yeah, you'd carry one of them around, and like if you were like, oh, he's sexy, damn it, oh, that's an 8. Oh, my nuts, and then yeah, but it's supposed to do the same thing.
Reminds me of like when Cartman, like it was a South Park movie, he got like the chip implanted. Anytime he cursed, he kind of gave himself a shock.
Yeah, it's kind of the same idea, except
But it became a weapon.
Yeah, it's kind of the same idea, but they attached them to their testicles or genitals. So.
And there's one more out of context quote. Personally speaking, fuck the Holy Ghost. I like that one.
Yeah.
I think a t-shirt could be in order for that.
Yeah, I said that because I was so frustrated listening and doing the research on it, and one of the stories really caught me. I'd read it, but I hadn't really read it, and it made me mad. And so I just decided to do the most heinous act in the Bible and blaspheme the Holy Spirit, just because I don't believe in it. So stop praying for me, damn it.
Yeah, I mean, the whole Trinity and all that stuff that people talk about as if it's all over the Bible, and not really. Sort of, But
3 times, I think.
You mentioned aversion therapy and how it's been used, and actually it's being banned by some states because it's been used for gay people. It's not scientific at all, but do you think aversion therapy would work for bacon?
No. I can't imagine anything that you could do to me to make me not eat bacon. In fact, my doctor said, you're dying because your cholesterol is so high. And I was like, fuck you, I'm eating bacon. Like, whatever.
And fuck the Holy Spirit. Sorry, Doc.
Yeah. No, I actually have not been told by my doctor that I'm dying because of that. I can't think of anything that would make me stop eating bacon. So, obviously, I got this way through hard work and effort. I'm not losing this stuff.
He's all man.
Yeah. All sexy. Yeah.
So tell me, how did you get involved in No Religion Required in the God Hates Facts section? You have to really pronounce that carefully.
I got involved. Well, I've known Bobby C since he started back last year. I met him at ReasonCon last year, and he was really stoked because I actually had a friend of mine who had listened to his podcast, and she was actually a really big fan. And we got to talk and everything. He's been a super cool guy, and then we got a chance to see each other again at this last ReasonCon, and we were just kind of talking and talking. We really connected that time, and so we've just been real good Facebook buddies and things like that. He's always been a big supporter of FACT. He's always been a big supporter of really pushing the movement and things like that. And one day we were talking, and I said, "Man, you need a science segment." And he's like, "Dude, you're absolutely right." And so that kind of, he goes, and so he gets Jeremiah involved, and he goes, "Oh, by the way, y'all are like the 2 smart people I know, so here, do something with this." And me and Jeremiah are like, "What?" And you're like, yeah, y'all got this. And so me and Jeremiah just started like, okay, where are we going to start? And Jeremiah was like, well, I guess it makes sense to start from the beginning. So we just went from there. So we started with Big Bang Theory about a month ago. And so I've had to revamp and pull out all my physics books and all that stuff. But it's not just physics; it's cosmology, and you're getting the astrophysics, and then you're getting so now I'm having to pull out my dictionary as well because I'm just I don't know what this word is. So, but we just Bobby wanted us to make up something that taught science at a level that him and Miss Ashley could understand.
Because they're all about the heart.
Right. And so
that's their joke. I'm repeating it.
Yeah. And they figured that if, they understood it, then everybody else would understand it. And so it's just a resource for people to kind of, say, okay, well, I can add that to my argument, and I can actually understand, when somebody's sitting there trying to argue with me about how the Big Bang never happened. Well, there's a lot of evidence for it, and I learned this on No Religion Required that, this happened, and this happened, and it all happened within a second. And so being able to have people who understand that even at a rudimentary level that we were going at is actually really good. And it's a good feeling to know that we're actually providing that for people.
Yeah, it's a version of the Barroom Atheist show where they want to give you arguments and things you can use in a bar room, in a casual situation where you can talk to people. Because if you need to get an advanced degree to understand these things, then you don't have a chance. But if you can talk about it and explain it in 5, 10, 20 minutes, then someone might actually go, oh, there is more to this. It's not just science made up something and decided to cover it up for the next 50 years. People do this for a living, and they're actually trying really hard to, debunk things or actually find out what's true.
I mean, and so we try for the most part to do a broad overview, but then really kind of delve in. So right now we've done a broad overview of essentially the Big Bang all the way up until planetary creations and nebula creations and star creation and things like that. And now we're going to go over the next episode, this Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll be actually going over fundamental forces of nature. So plug for No Religion Required. Catch us on Spreaker.com/No Religion Required.
Get in the chat room. I was on there a couple weeks ago. And you mentioned on that chat room a couple weeks ago you being in a polyamorous relationship, and I was just very intrigued about this.
It is something that I have been exploring with my wife, and that we have just started kind of, just seeing if it's something that's a good fit for us. We've always been very, very able to communicate to each other. We have a fantastic relationship. All my strengths, really help her with some of the things that she struggles with, and then all my weaknesses, she's really able to step in and help me with because they're her strengths. And so we have a very good relationship. And we listen to a podcast called Savage Lovecast. It's Dan Savage.
Yeah, Dan Savage, yeah.
Yeah, based out of Seattle, Washington. And it's probably been the single most influential thing as far as building our relationship the way it is. He's always taking in calls, and so we listen to all the good calls, all the bad calls, and then we really, we sit there and we actually communicate with each other back and forth about how we feel about things, how we, things like that. And she introduced me to it 3 years ago, and we always realized that we could not see ourselves being like the end-all be-all as far as sex was concerned. And so that's one of those things that when we figured that out, well, how do you feel about this? How do you feel about this? And, we really wanted to build the relationship before we did anything crazy like that. So we waited a long time, and then, just recently we just started talking about actually delving into it and seeing what we found and seeing if it really was something that we enjoyed and if it was something that we thought we could do. And so it's a lot of fun, and it's been a lot of different things that we didn't expect in some cases, but at the same time, we've actually made a lot of really neat new friends and people that we can be comfortable around and not have to be so PC about things.
So in short, polyamory is basically you're in a committed relationship, but you're allowed to explore other relationships.
No, that's more of an open relationship. Polyamory is actually where it's such a broad definition of it. Polyamory is actually where you can explore different, like, hardcore relationships, like actual relationships. Whereas in an open relationship, you can go out and you can have sex with other people, but the other person doesn't necessarily want to be involved or know anything about it, or they don't care to know anything about it. Polyamory is much more. Um, your partner is either friends with the person that you're with, or in our case, we are both in a relationship with another person. And so but then there's trips, there's quads, there's or I'm sorry, there's triads where there's 3 people, there's quads where there's 4 people, and then you have family network groups where it's different people who all kind of live close together, who all kind of intermingle. And so the hardest part is just getting around the jealousy issue and things like that. That's a natural reaction to a large number of different things that happen. So once you can separate yourself from that and start understanding, that the happiness of your partner is more important than a petty ass feeling that doesn't, belong in a natural relationship, you start understanding how much fun you can have.
And based on your studies of the Bible, you know how well those monogamous relationships end up.
It's not just the studies of the Bible; it's also just the studies of monogamous relationships in the world. You look at it right now. We're sitting at 57% of marriages end in divorce, and of those marriages, it's like an 80% of them end up in divorce because of adultery. It's because a lot of people out there are not meant to be a monogamous person or in a monogamous relationship, and they just need to be honest with themselves about it.
And not just conservative radio talk show hosts, right?
Right, absolutely. A lot of people need to realize that they can have the relationships that they want if they're just honest and communicate with a partner who's willing to be honest and communicate back. That's the biggest thing between me and my wife, is we both are honest with each other at all times, and we also communicate about everything.
Well, that sounds awesome, and thanks for kind of explaining that, because it's not always a subject that comes up in the Atheist podcast, but it just saw the mention on the chat room, and there was a lot of other crazy stuff in the chat room. So yeah, you need to get on there.
The no religion required chat room is the coolest place to be on Sunday nights at 7 p.m.
Yeah, and a lot of your favorite podcast types are on there, and the hangers-on. A lot of people you may have met at ReasonCon are there as well. So we're getting close to the end of the hour, so it's time for Shane to turn the tables and ask me a question.
Oh, good Lord. You didn't tell me I was going to have to do this. I don't do that crap. No. What are your thoughts on polyamory?
I have just heard of it, and yeah, not really. I can see how this thing that works for some people, because you have this idea. It's like you grow up and you are in one religion, and you never think of any other religions. Like, you don't think there's any other options for you. And you think if you get into a relationship and you get married, there's one way you have to do it. And if you're in certain religions, there is one way you have to do it. So I just like to see that other people are trying different things and it's actually working for them. It's not, because you'll hear, especially when it's around sex, there's always this like, well, one partner's pressuring the other partner into doing it, or it's just because the guy wants to have sex with other women. And when you find out that it's something that you both worked at, and it sounds like it took you a long time to get there, it's really cool.
Yeah. You find a lot of the healthier poly relationships are very much, all the partners are very honest and communicate with each other. And then, of course, you do find the ones where the husband just did it because he wants to, his wife wants to sleep around with other men. The wife is only doing it because the husband wants to see her with another girl, or the husband wants to sleep with other women. And those are really bad examples, and those are ones that you hear about because they're really successful open or poly relationships. You don't really hear about anything about because there's no drama involved. So therefore, nobody's being put on blast on Facebook. Nobody's being put on, blast on emails and stuff like that. So you only hear about the bad ones, but the majority of them, I'd say 90% of them are really good, positive relationships. No single person would ever be able to provide every single thing that another single person needs if both people are honest with each other.
Yeah, it's impossible. It'd be like you and your wife are the only two people in the world. It's like my wife doesn't like football, so I have friends that I watch football with, or I want to go see a certain movie that my wife doesn't want to see. I'll go see it with a friend, or it's okay, but you kind of have to work it out. And this subject is tough. And you mentioned drama. It's like if you watch TV shows, it's very rare for a TV show to depict like a loving couple that doesn't like break up or someone's cheating, because they need that drama. And I think we hear all about all this drama and we just crave it. And in real life, that just leads to really bad endings.
Yeah.
So like figure out the way.
Somebody's gonna Lorena Bob at the other person, dang it.
Yeah. And you want a situation, ideally what you want in any relationship, and especially a marriage or a long-term partnership, is it's making both of you better people. So if that's happening, however you're doing it, then that's great. My wife's encouraging me. Well, I don't know if she's always encouraging me to do this show, but I think without her at least giving me a little bit of a push, I probably wouldn't be doing it, and I really enjoy it. So I'm glad we're able to do that. Even though we don't always agree. It's hard to believe. We don't always agree. What's that all about? That's crazy talk. So Shane, before we call it a night, pimp thyself. Where do people find your shows? Where do they find you online? They find your local group and all that stuff. And of course your fine t-shirts.
Thank you for modeling my t-shirt. You can actually find those t-shirts at facriticalthinker.org/shop. You can find me if you're in Winston-Salem, North Carolina area, at meetup.com/FACT, fact. And you can also find me on the Facebook and on the Twitter. On Twitter, it's FA Critical Thinker. And also on Twitter is Fried Podcast. I had to think about that one for a second. I haven't used it a whole lot. So it's at Fried Podcast. And then, of course, you can find me on Facebook if you're friends with Zach. And let's see. Oh, countryfriedfreethought.com. You can find us there, and our podcasts are released on Spreaker. Spreaker.com/countryfriedfreethought.
If you thought you couldn't fry everything, well, you can country fry your free thought even. Yes. We're in the South. We fry and we make it work. So thank you, Shane, for being on the show, and thanks everybody for listening, watching, downloading, commenting, making fun of me, anything that you need to make commentary. So once again, thanks, and stay skeptical.